and it's still not. There we go. It's in there. Kobe's there. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another Thursday night.
Got to give the people. No, that's Jalen Jacoby.
Hey, we need the energy. We love the energy. Welcome to everybody that's tuning in to another episode of The Good Life, another Thursday night live stream. We're here in the building. We got Stu with us. We got Kobe. I'm Chris. Kevin is off again, kind of taking care of some other stuff. But again, we can rock and roll with us three. Thank you for everyone that's joining us. Thank you for everyone that's hit us up over the past few weeks. If you've been watching the show and getting some value, thanks so much. Everyone that's following us and watching this on YouTube, please click the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. This is how you get to see it a little bit more. Everyone that's on LinkedIn and Facebook, feel free to write in your questions or comment as you're here on the live stream. We want to, again, come to add value. This is the good life: health, wealth, love, and happiness. The components of a good life. We want to give you what you need to craft that life for yourself. So tonight we're going into we were struggling with how to actually phrase this, right?
I know, right?
Because it's, again, health, wealth, love, happiness. We went through health, we went through wealth, we went through love last week, and so this was happiness. But to say like the good life, happiness, like it's weird, right? It didn't really flow. So tonight, though, we're going into overall mindset, overall happiness, overall feeling, and that's where Stu jumps in. So Stu, take it away, brother. You got the night.
Thank you, bro. Now, I was kind of thinking about this as well. Like, are we diving into happiness today? Are we diving into the lifestyle today? I really love both of these topics because one, both John and I have a little bit of that, both Kobe and I have a little bit of that awesome, like, I believe your terminology was lifestyle designer. And that is like a huge part of what we do because we want to embody that. Like Kobe and I and Chris, when it comes to wealth, et cetera, like I feel like all three of us and Kevin regarding relationships, we all have so much integrity for what we put out, what we share, what we coach people on. And, when it comes to happiness and lifestyle, it's always been such a fascinating topic for me that I allowed myself to sit in the back seat of my entire life. Like I basically was like, okay, you know what? I have been told that if I get good grades, I do a couple sports, I do some extracurriculars, I go to college, I get a job, I plan for retirement, get the car, get the mortgage, get the wife, get the kids. I had all this checklist laid out for me of what it means to live a happy life and live a lifestyle of your choosing. But the irony of the lifestyle of your choosing is the fact that it's not really a choice when you're living by somebody else's checklist. You're not actually actively, like, critically thinking about what do I actually want to do with my life? I mean, because I think a lot of individuals, they get stuck on that track I was just discussing, and really where they distinguish themselves is what they major in college and what career path they take. So what I think is fascinating about, the three of us in this room and Kevin, who's not present at the moment, is we have all taken the entrepreneurial route. Now, I know a lot of people that love their 9-to-5s, but the beautiful thing that the entrepreneurial route has to offer when it comes to happiness and lifestyle is everything's your choice. Your time, your money, how much you charge, when you work, who you want to work with. There were so many situations back in corporate for me where I wasn't really with the team I wanted to be on, didn't necessarily have the right boss for me, didn't want to have the right project or like a commute or just whatever it was. I didn't have choices. So, this whole week I've kind of been preparing for this, and I was ready to prepare like for like the happiness thing, right? Everybody has a different definition of happiness. I'm going to ask you guys what y'all's definition is in a moment, as well as how you would define like the good life lifestyle. But for me, I guess I want to kick it off by saying, to me, happiness is progress. And I have thought that, I'm pretty sure since middle school, I've like repeated that to myself over and over again because there's a couple components that go into that. One, you avoid destination addiction, which is I'll be happy once I have this. And when you focus on the phrase happiness is progress, you're avoiding that destination addiction because you're forcing yourself to be grateful for where you are now compared to where you are before, how much you progressed. And also because you're progressing, because you're looking back in time like that, because you're looking at yourself on this part of the timeline, the present moment as well, you're also looking at what your goals are for the future. So happiness is progress, has always kind of kept me looking at my timeline from start to present to finish. And that one has been so powerful for me. So I guess just to kind of kick it off, like, what do you guys think? What is happiness to you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in because that's awesome, Stu. And you know, you and I have had a bunch of these conversations. Of one of the things that you hit on is that, you know, progress equals happiness. It took me a long time to understand that, but that's where I'm at now as well. My definition is exactly the same as yours. Is that's actually what happiness is. Before, again, you sum this up as far as like that destination, like you think happiness is when you get to the place. So I used to think happiness was when I became successful, right? When I made the money, when I got to that level of influence, that's when I felt like I would be happy. That was happiness because I got there. And then through the journey of entrepreneurship, you start to realize that you have to find a way to be happy during the process. That is the key. Like, if you're always pushing out happiness, like further and further out to whenever it, you know, you reach that thing, you actually never get there and you live this miserable life. So my definition is just like yours. Happiness is progress. The more that you feel that I am moving forward, I'm happy, I'm content, right? You know, the PK here, Kobi, would possibly talk about, right? Like, you know, in the Bible, it talks about, right, being content where you are, right? Just being content. But that content, I always think about also as like, it's happiness. Like, are you happy where you are? Again, you might not be, you know, happy with your circumstance, whatever the case is, but if you can find happiness in any situation that you're in, if you're progressing, if you're moving forward. So that has been my definition for the past few years, which is that progress equals happiness. But before, it was very much so about the destination. It was very much about when I get to that place, then I'll be okay. And I had to get rid of that because I would have quit. I would have quit the journey, right? Like it wouldn't have continued to go, because you need you need to feel some form of fulfillment or happiness or excitement in order to continue going. So that's me.
Can you elaborate on that point a little bit? So you said that if you hadn't have reframed your definition of happiness, that you would quit. So like, what was a little bit of that terminology change?
I mean, honestly, Stu, it was more along the lines of like, as you're going through the process, as I was going through the process of building a business, becoming an entrepreneur, getting out of that employee mindset, kind of getting into the entrepreneur mindset, I was so driven and so laser focused and so like head down, tunnel vision, which is actually how you have to be as an entrepreneur, right? If you want to be successful, like you have to be very much so that way. And the other side is also, because you're tunnel vision, you're always looking at how to correct, how to shift, what's different. And as I was going down that path, I found myself having less joy throughout the days. Like over time, I got more and more burnt out, more and more like, this isn't fun, more and more having those thoughts come in, which every entrepreneur gets and every person that's building something great gets, of like, is this worth it? Is the price that I'm paying, is this worth it? Because this doesn't feel good. I am not happy. And then you start seeing the other areas in your life. I started seeing areas in my marriage or my family life that I'm not happy, but it's because I was so tunnel vision on this entrepreneurial journey that it could have been very quick that I like lost all of the other stuff. So that reframe really came by me saying like, and you know, partly to my faith, partly to getting back into the scripture and really understanding like what God says where we're supposed to be and how we're supposed to kind of think about our situations. I got to a place where I could be content where I was. I could be happy where I was. And that started to open up the door. That started to make me say, okay, I don't have to be as tunnel vision. I can still enjoy, I can still be happy for the small moments. I can still be happy in, right, the family, like it's all the little things. Once you start to see that, once I started to see that, that's when things changed.
Yeah. What you got, Kobe?
So I really love that. Both that, I guess it's truly the same because you agreed, right? That happiness is progress. I love that. And I think I have some version of that, and I'm trying to kind of capture what my version would be. And it would be more so like happiness is the difference, is not the difference between reality and expectation, but the story that I make up about the difference.
I like that.
We go ahead and clip that one right there.
Say that one again.
Clip
Go ahead, man.
PK.
Drop those bars again, man. Let's do it.
Whoa, don't put me in the booth. But no, because I agree with that in that first part. Is that's kind of how we're trained, right? Whether in school, whether with friends, whether in sports and competition. You get the win, and that's when you're happy, right? When you're playing sports, you're not happy throughout the process of trying to get the win, right? The process sucks, but the win is worth everything. Well, really, when I see it, the people that succeed are the ones that actually enjoy the process, and the win. The win is the cherry on top. They want it, but the process, they fall in love with the process, and that produces their happiness. So I think that's what I'll look at. And also, there's this phrase that always comes to mind for me. It's like, it's like a Ghanaian phrase you would hear is, who go happy you go happy yourself, right? And that just reminds me all the time, it's like happiness is not who go happy you go happy yourself, right? So who's going to make you happy? Nothing external is going to make you happy. It's an internal game, right? So and the field might be even smaller than we think it is, which it might just be between these two goalposts. Right. And so, so I think that's a great question. And I think that would be my response for now.
Man, the story word hit me big time, because that's something that I've grappled with for the past year or so, is the idea. I think I got it from my friend Keith with neuro yoga. Mental movies is how he portrays it. Whatever we perceive going on around us. I'm a dork, right? So I've always been an engineer, a science guy, whatever, numbers, math, whatever. When I every once in a while, I'll walk around the street and I won't picture people as I'll only picture them as at the end of the day, their mind and their perception of reality, they're just a brain. They're just a brain floating around that just happens to have a different body, different skin color, different muscular features, whatever. And the reason I remind myself to do that is because literally everything that we perceive, all that is happening is light is coming into our eyes, sound vibrations are coming into our ears. And at the end of the day, everything that we do is a story. It's a mental movie, what we see around us. So I love that you brought up the word story, because it's so powerful, because I have self-sabotaged myself so many times throughout my life. And it was only until recently that I began to start to identify that I was doing that. And it's because I started telling myself stories about my situation, about my reality, that were just excessively negative, which is funny because I've always been an outwardly positive guy. But inside, I had these negative mental movies going on, these negative stories. So when you learn to control those stories and focus on just shaping it and really harnessing it and not allowing it to become this brooding atmosphere. I mean, that word story just got me deep, dude.
It's so true. It's the old saying, life is what, 10% what happens to us, 90% how we react to it. That goes back to those stories that we tell ourselves, and the kind of how we're reacting to, like you said, Kobe, the expectations we have set, right? The word expectations is always big too, because That's the thing that causes us to not feel as content as we want to. Like it didn't meet our expectations. It didn't meet what we thought we would have done. And I think again goes back to that what's going on between these two right there, right? It's about understanding like what's happening in our brain, so that what stories are we telling ourselves, so that we're having different outcomes. So
yeah. And Kobi, like you were saying, and Chris, you reiterated it, between the ears type thing. Like happiness really is an internal game, and it ties into everything we've been talking about so far. But I just think it's so important to reiterate, especially coming off of the relationship call last week. Sorry, I wish I'd have been there, man. But coming off of that call, like when it comes to relationships, I mean, how many of us grew up with the idea thrown at us that someone else is going to come by and swoop you up and make you happy? Like whether it's a guy or a girl, like there was some type of knight in shining armor or damsel in distress that was going to complete you and really like turn everything around. And that's such BS, such BS. Like, it is an internal game without a doubt. Like there is absolutely no amount of money, no amount of material possessions, no amount of individuals around you, close or quantity, like quality or quantity, that can achieve that for you. And some of the individuals that may be watching this, like you guys may have been doing a lot of like introspective work and a lot of like self-help stuff by the time you've seen this. Others may be brand new to the idea of like looking outside of what mainstream society has you focused on, but it's not about the external. Kobi could not have said it better. It is an internal game. It is everything that you have to do with inside your head. And I know Kobi's going to love this one, Kevin as well. Chris, I think you're there as well. But it also has to do with how your body is functioning, because they are 100% tied together. Like your mental health and your physical health are so intricately tied together. It is ridiculous. And Kobi knows a lot more about that than I do. But I'd love for you to like take that segue and run with it for a second if you want.
Yeah, man. I think that's so understated, man. It's incredible. The bridge between the mind and the body, when you talk about mind-body connection, is the breath. Again, when we going back to last week's conversation, I want to point out two things to help kind of make this connection here, and then toss it over to you guys to kind of add or give examples where this may have been true in your life. But we look at if the body, so the Bible speaks of a well, right? And without going too far down that road, you can't have a cup of wine and then pour a whole bunch of water in it and then think that it's going to taste the same, or have dirty water poured in it and then think it's all going to be the same. It's not. So I think as you were talking, even as I was imagining that brain floating around, the one thing that came to me was just like, that's overemphasis, right? We're overemphasizing the importance of the brain and taking it away from the whole, right? What is the brain? What is the arm without a leg? What is a brain without everything else that functions around it? Which is always so interesting to me, because this comes back to last week, and that the biggest mistake I consistently seen made in Western science and Western everything really is just like the separation, right, of things rather than emphasis on systems, right? Everything is a system. Nothing functions outside of a system. That's not even possible. Nothing functions outside of a system. So I look at that, and what it brings to mind is the idea of kind of the stories and how that fits into. In our first decade, and Kevin was talking about traumas, whether you want to call it traumas or inner child work or shadow work, or I call it what happened, or anchors, or whatever you want to call it. We have, before our first decade, we have maybe like 3 to 5, I don't know, quote whatever scientist or psychologist you want to quote, but incidents where we essentially construct our identity, right? And so you are sitting in second, third grade, All right, I told my third grade story, but you're sitting in second and third grade. You got to go back to last episode and check that out. Look on the Facebook page or something; it will be there. But you're sitting in second grade. You raise your hand, you answer a question, and you get it wrong, and everybody looks at you and laughs. At that point, what do you decide about yourself and the world in which you live in? Yeah. Whatever you decide at that point, you carry. Go ahead, Chris. You were going to answer that.
I mean, I was just going to say you have choices at that time. You could either figure out like, hey, I'm never going to ask a question again because this was too painful and I don't want to be laughed at.
What did you decide?
What did I? Man, so that specific scenario.
Yeah, you raised a hand, you got a question wrong. Somebody, people laughed. You're embarrassed in front of a class. What did you decide?
I think I'm probably most likely shut down. I really don't know how I would handle that or would have handled that as a child, but like I probably would have went back into some form of a shell, right? Some form of a like, hey, like that was just too uncomfortable. So I may not ask that question, or I may just like check and see like, is this a good question to ask, or was this answered, or whatever the case is.
So make sure it's a good question before you ask. Stu, what did you decide when everybody laughed?
Dude, I was thinking about that, and I feel like I knew how to play the game because I raised my hand if I had like a 90% like certainty I was going to get this question right. And man, I worked my butt off in school. So I'm actually trying to remember that. I feel like to me, what's coming to mind is not like the same emotional reaction that you're talking about is coming to mind. Like when I would like make a joke in front of a group of people and it did not land at all. I was like, oh, like that's what I got from that. Is so like
what did you decide at that moment when that joke didn't land?
Oh, I started making jokes to people I didn't know like that. So like it really like I remember growing up and being like kind of an odd duck at times, and it really made me start to understand the concept of like, okay, there are people around you that are acquaintances, and then you have a circle inside of that and a circle inside of that, and like the closer and closer to your inner circle, the more and more I can put myself out there on a terrible pun that I think is hilarious. So like, it's funny how you brought that up and it transferred to that instance. But I mean, I get what you're saying. Like those types of events when we're so young and we're having a difficult time looking at things from like the bigger picture and getting outside of just the one perspective of managing your emotions, like that can cause like, I'm not going to say irreparable, but some very, very deep wounds that we then maneuver around. And to me, that type of emotional occurrence, like that mental scar, if you will, in how we think and our behavior accordingly, like that reminds me so much of the body. Like you get some type of like damage in your body, then all of a sudden you start to compensate around it and use other things and you make it worse. So yeah, that hits pretty hard, man. That's a good example.
Yeah, and I want to add on to that analogy a little bit there. I think it's interesting. I pay attention to kind of like how we're describing it, right? So it's in like the irreparable harm, scars, and it's very kind of vivid, warlike language, right? And that's what I would have used too. So as I'm hearing that, I'm saying to myself, well, what if we just describe it as just like stories reconstructed?
Mm-hmm.
And that we can unconstruct it, because I think that's what it is, in the sense that we essentially build our playing board in that first decade, right? And then we play the game for the rest of our life that way. And so I'm in a situation where I'm like, oh, I have no options. I'm trapped. I have nothing to do. And then you come in with your board and you're like, wait, no, you can just talk to the person and figure it out. It's not that big of a deal. That doesn't exist on my circuitry, right? And I think it's really interesting how that piece also relates to scar tissue buildup, and that we feel that pain as if we should run away from that pain, where really you release trigger points or scar tissue by going like 50% and then breathing your way through it, right? So I just think it's interesting parallels that you see occurring, because really whatever occurs in the mind, whatever occurs in the body, are just mirror universes of each other. And I think that's what you were originally kind of tossing the ball over for me to dive into a little bit more. And notice where it is that you feel pain physically. It's typically where you've stored quote unquote trauma and things of that nature. And also typically how your body will respond when you're triggered in that way. Is that something you guys have noticed?
Dude, I remember hearing that exact type of idea like 2 years ago and being like, that's bull. And it just didn't make any sense. You know what I mean? It didn't make any sense. But then like you actually start to think about it, and you start to actually practice yoga, not just to burn calories, but to actually like connect with your body, and you practice like mindful meditation with proper posture and grounding, and you all of a sudden start to realize, wow, when I like relax my traps and like my rear delts and my shoulders and everything, like there's a lot of tension that just dissipates in my head too. And then you start to explore that. So
Stu, walk us through that, bro, because like there's a lot of people that I'm sure are either watching this or that we all know that still think that's a bunch of BS, right?
Yeah.
That's still just
great point.
Like,
go ahead.
Dude, I can name like, I don't know, 80% of my friends, because most of my network, we all come from like the bros, like the gym bros, the construction bros, like the happy hour, let's go out. Like we know how to have a lot of fun and like party and do all that kind of thing, but we don't really, the majority of my friends don't really like take the conversation to this level. So I guess for everybody out there that's like thinking that what we're talking about is BS, feel free to reach out to any one of us, because we have started in a place where we were, we were all once products of what society and what conventional, like wisdom is like brought to us. But then we start to realize, man, like something's not right. And if you're starting to figure out that something's not right, I challenge you to go try every single thing that you think is BS. Try it. And not just one time so you can just say you checked it off and say that yoga's stupid or yoga's for girls. I've heard all kinds of stereotypes about yoga. Yoga's amazing, okay? Like, if anything that you think is woo-woo, like, just convince yourself to, like, open your mind and believe it and do it for, like, whatever. Like, obviously it's situational, but do it for an extended period of time to where you can actually experience what they're talking about. Because you can learn something, and Chris, I know you and I have talked about this a lot. You can learn something from every single person and situation on this planet, whether it's a good lesson or it's a thing not to do. Like if somebody's out there as passionate about fruit as Kobi or as finance as Chris, like they're not bullshitting. Like they're passionate about it because they've lived it, because they see people struggling with it. So if you think something is woo-woo, you have to try it. And that's pretty much how I live my life across the board, which actually takes me to my next point in this conversation. So thank you very much for that alley-oop, Chris. I think my biggest, I kind of want to open this up. Usually we wait till the end to kind of have like a last bit of advice. I kind of wanted to change it up this time. We're halfway through, and I want to kind of hear from you guys what your like number one advice for someone who is unhappy. And I say that because it's such an elusive word, right? There's so much going on there, but someone who is unhappy, seeking a happier lifestyle. What is y'all's like number one thing? And I'll kick it off with, to me, expose yourself to different types of people, different cultures, and live in any other city aside from your hometown for at least 2 years. I don't care. Just do it. Because I'm thankful that my mom was Australian, my dad's American, Kobe's got a little bit of both Ghana and here as well. And like when you have different cultures, and different just things. Like you get to all of a sudden compare, like this society lives like this and the other society lives like this. They both say their way is the best way. Figure out what you like, pick and choose. You can't do that unless you leave your hometown. I promise you. I have not met anybody who has not left their own hometown and gone out and explored and met other people. I mean, if you are going to stay in your hometown, fine, but you have to interact with so many different types of people. You have to. Yeah. That's how you're going to figure it out. So what do you guys think?
Kobi, jump in, man.
Oh, man. My biggest advice that I would give if you're struggling with your sense of happiness, that's the question, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I would say, one, examine your definition of happiness. You know, hey, listen, I'm Ghanaian, so I always got to give you a 3-step process. All right. Number one, what you do, you must, and then, darn, I lost that first one there, but
the audio cut out on the first one, so you're good.
Can you hear me?
The audio cut out on the first one, so you're good. Redo. Let's go.
Okay, bet. Examine your definition of what it is that you're calling this happiness thing. Like, what is it? Right? And then 2, I would say find a different access point. Find a different access point. I'll actually come back to 2 and say 3 is really look at, like, what are you conflating? What is the context in which you're looking at? Now, coming back to find a different access point, I think going back to the idea of the 3 universes, if some people it's easier to go through the body, others through the mind, others through the spirit. This is what I mean by that. If you are struggling with your sense of happiness, look at what is it that you're thinking all the time. What are your thoughts that are consistently running through your mind? And obviously, again, through the body, you can quiet those thoughts through breath. I would actually not say go ahead and just start meditation. That's like, if you do nothing else, fine, just start. But I would actually find somebody who knows what they're doing to help you get going, because otherwise the first one can be a little like, what am I doing? Let me toss it aside. But it takes a little, it's like riding a bike. It takes a little getting used to. So find somebody there and learn to quiet your mind as to what it is that you're thinking all the time. Because guys, truthfully, we think a lot. We've placed a lot of emphasis on thought and thinking, but like not a lot of great things comes out of that, actually. Really what comes out of that is a lot of pressure, a lot of anxiety, a lot of like, right? When we're in flow, we're not really thinking. We've combined all 3. You understand? Well, so you're thinking, but you're not like actively like school type thinking. You're just in flow. You're doing. Yeah. All right. So I think look at that. 2, what are you doing physically all the time? I think when something is going on and you can't change your thoughts, change your physical being. Get up, do something else. Get up, move, do. That's why exercise is so important. And then lastly, what are the words that you're consistently speaking? All right, what are the words that you're consistently speaking? Because that is the kind of the reality, right? And out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, man. Listen, gotta give you a last one right there. Give you the last one right there. Because if it's just brewing and brewing and brewing and brewing, I say this stuff because this is me, man. This is the work I've had to do. Like stuff just consistently running. You're consistently that like audio, and then you combine it with some visuals, right? You get that whole film. We're great. What are they, cinematographers? We build this fantastic movie in our head, and we have to have a villain, and we have to have a hero, and it's always going, right? So look at those 2 things. That'll be my advice, right? Mind, body, spirit. What are you thinking? What are you doing? And what are you consistently saying? And I think when you change those things, you can find an alignment that really helps you find your sense of happiness, however you define it to be.
Man, those are good. That was good. You guys again, this is why we do this show. Again, hopefully everyone listening and watching is getting some value, because these are nuggets. These are gems. Like there's so many people dealing with unhappiness. There's so many people dealing with a lack of fulfillment in their life, and they actually don't know where to start, or, they're consuming too much information that's not really helping them. So if you are listening and this is you, like, again, hopefully you're like taking some notes, because these are gems. To a degree, you guys said everything I was going to say, but to kind of touch on some of those things, Stu, that you were saying about, leaving your city, I always just say, it's one of those things of exposing yourself to new things, right? If you are unhappy in the place that you're at right now, first, I think you have to be aware of what is it that you are unhappy about. Kind of like Kobi said, what is your definition of how are you even defining happiness anyway? That's the starting point. If you feel like you're lacking, well, what are you lacking? Like, what is it? Back to our conversation earlier, what's your expectation? Like, you're unhappy because you feel like you should be somewhere different, or you thought this should have been like, what is it that you really want out of this? That's where I think the first place is that you start. And then, yes, I sum up kind of what you said, Stu, is just being open-minded enough. Being open-minded to know that you can change and you have control over every aspect of your life. Over every aspect of your life, you have control over it. And sometimes we don't think so. Sometimes we don't think we could make this change, or we could just move to a different city, or we can get out of that relationship, or we don't always think that. But you have 100% control of your life. Everything comes with, right? It's pros and cons. There may be consequences to your decision. I posted something on Instagram today and TikTok about right? Like, quit your job. Like, and again, I was just kind of running on a trend. It's true. People say that. And yeah, the message is like, if you're so unhappy, just leave. Like, yes, there are some consequences. You're not going to have money. That's a consequence, like, of quitting. But you could find it, right? Like, you could go get another job. Like, you could go start a bit. Like, there's so many things you could do if you didn't just say, like, oh, I have to be here because I have, like, no, you don't have to do anything. And that's kind of to, like, Stu's point. Like, you could pick up and leave. Like, you can just go travel if you want to. Again, there may be consequences. You may have to you may be poor. Like, you may not be able to stay in the nicest place. Like those things may happen. However, you have the choice. So for people that are, again, going through this thing of like, oh, I'm unhappy, first and foremost, figure out what that even means to you. What are you searching for? What's the vision? Like, what are you trying to get to, right? Are these realistic? Are they unrealistic expectations you've set for yourself? Are these things that, like, you can actually achieve, or is this stuff that you're beating yourself up over, right? You hear a lot of people say, like, oh, I should have done this by the time I was 30. It's like, but now you're 30. So, like, you can't go back, right? Like, it is what it is, right? So
do it now.
Exactly, right? So, like, do it now. Like, what's next? So you got to understand that side. And then, yeah, it's just about being open-minded, changing your environment, seeing different things of life. Because, and again, we can keep pulling back to the stuff we've already talked about. Like Kobi said, like our board of life, like how we're looking at things. When you get exposed to other things and other people and other cultures, you start to realize that the way that you live isn't the way that it has to be, because you'll see other people living happily, right, content with their life, and they live a completely separate, different life than yours, but it's possible that you could do the same thing. So everything's in your control. That would be the thing I would leave you with. Everything's in your control. If you're really that unhappy, figure out why and then change it, right? Like, actually be open-minded enough to, like, say, I can change this.
Yeah. You're not stuck. I mean, like, I would venture, Chris, I don't know quite as much about your background as I do Kobi's, but I would assume that every one of us has had significant highs and significant lows in our life. And when you're in that low, when you're younger and you're not as acquainted with that, the reality that, how was I going to phrase this earlier? I was thinking about a way to define happiness where, to me, you can truly state that you are happy, that even on days when you are unhappy, you still are extremely content, because you know that this is just one day out of everything else, and you have your highs and lows, and you have the maturity and the perspective to zoom out on your timeline and not just focus on the present moment, not just focus on today or the week, but being able to look at that progress like we talked about earlier and understanding that you have the highs and lows, like
that was the word, perspective.
Yeah.
That sums it up, Stu. Like people, we typically lose perspective of life, of like what it is, what we're here to do, like what we're trying to accomplish, or just what happiness is. We lose perspective of it. And so that also goes back to why exposing yourself to other people, other cultures, other things, because they have a different perspective of life than you. And like Kobi said, that might be the perspective you want to adapt. You might want to say like, hey, that I like your perspective. I like the way you look at life. I like your, contentness with life. I want that. And then you can just model that and mirror that and pick that up.
Yeah.
And I will say this to add this as well. The question popped up in my head, like, well, what if for whatever reason you can't leave your physical space, right? So I think it's really important to highlight that, because I've often thought about this in the sense of, what if physically you're trapped somehow, right? Well, you still, again, this is why I emphasize there's 3 ways to access. You still have 2 other ways to access, right? And so I think it's important to know that. How did Nelson Mandela last for those many years?
Yeah,
right?
great.
It's and I think it's so critical to realize that we have a blank board and we're building the board, and we really have like 2 things that we're using, and it's mind, body, spirit, in the sense of like language, thoughts, and actions. So happiness is in the congruency of those things, right? That's you. So you just decide. It's kind of like the slot board. If you want, you win by getting all 7s, all waters, all blues. It doesn't matter which one you get. I don't actually play slots, so I don't know.
I don't know what you're talking about.
You win by getting a match is my whole point. And that's to me what kind of happiness is. It's like, oh, they all match. You kind of think about OCD person. It's like, I don't care what color they are. I just want them all the same color.
Tony Robbins talks about something similar when he, like, I think I listened to like an NLP audio of his neuro-linguistic programming, and he talks about like being able to change our state, being able to change, like, I think it's your syntax, which is the way you're putting words together, right? And then there's probably something else, but that's exactly what you're saying, Kobi. Like, if you can't, and I think we always have control to change our state. Go back to Nelson Mandela, right? Like even though his like body was locked in, right, a prison cell, like he could still get up, move his body, change his state, right? Like do some push-ups, do some workout. Like, and I don't know if he really did. I'm sure he had some form of activity, but that's also part of it, right? Yes, you can be confined, but you still can move your body. You might not be able to fly to another city, but you can still move your body differently and start to talk to yourself differently or speak out loud differently. And so, yeah, those are definitely other access points and things that you can do.
And I'll tell you this, man, even if you couldn't move your body, and I think that's really, to me, like what truly amazes me, true masters, right? You can do the same thing that your body. What if you could do the same thing your body does, right? In terms of lift this computer, do that, but you could do it with your breath, or you could do it with your mind. That's what I'm talking about. Push it even further than that. You know what I mean? We see the great, we see it as cartoons now, by like great, masters going down in water for like hours or whatnot, right? These are having that degree. I think a lot of times when we fall into a state of like chaos is where we say it's like, I'm not happy, right? Because you just like, oh, what's going on? There's nothing to do. But you put me in the middle of an NBA basketball game. I'm like, oh, I feel threatened here. You put Jordan there and it's chemistry to him. He's like, oh, everything's moving slow. Everything's moving, because there's alignment, there's congruence. So I think really like hammering in, like, for example, what if you are disabled or you're not able to, I don't know the right term, man, but whatever, but you're not able to physically move, man. I think, you guys getting what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's actually a really great point you make. One of my clients actually is, and actually 2, and they have had, we have had to focus on, I never thought about it like this, but like different access points. Like we haven't been able to focus on the physical access point as much. So very, very well put, Kobe. Actually, the whole congruence idea really segues into my last point here, before like closing comments or whatever. And that is that, happiness, like you guys are saying, you can't just have it if only one area of your life is thriving.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, I think it was like Steve Jobs. I don't remember the exact quote, but he's one of those highly successful businessmen with all the money in the world. And he was like, I wish I had spent more time with friends and family. He said something along those lines. And because a lot of people still to this day, no matter how much the three of us talk about this, think that money is the sole key, or think that like physical health is the sole key, or just mental health is the sole, like, or just the perfect relationship is the sole key. Like the 4 pillars that we're talking about here today of the good life, each one of those has to be strong. You may desire to have a greater focus on finance or physical or relationship or mental, like whatever the case may be. You may desire to prioritize one over the rest, but the others still have to be solid. And I've always thought about it as, I mean, what we're talking about here is a little bit more complicated than work-life balance. Like, but I use that example because that's like what was most commonly iterated in today's society. Like, find the right balance, or as that, her name slips my mind, but I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, somebody jumped onto our Clubhouse chat and mentioned that another way to look at it is harmony. Find the right balance or harmony of all the different areas in your life that basically take you into that flow state that Kobe was talking about. Mm-hmm. And if you're not really familiar with what flow state is, or that's like one of those woo-woo expressions that you're just not really about, let me speak to the gamers out there, such as myself. When you can sit there and you are not, it does not take extrinsic motivation to do something. Like, you do it because you want to, and when you're doing it, you're so like involved that you're not really thinking about it. Like, to me, like, if like 10 guys pop up on the screen, like, I don't have time to think about all 10. I just had to act. Like, that is flow state. When you're just like or the example that Kobe brought up with Jordan. Jordan's just out there doing his thing because he's developed himself to such an awesome level to where his flow state, he can just run around the court and do whatever the heck he wants. Like, flow state is where time disappears. So if you can get your life to have the congruence and have all these pillars to where they're like integrated and working together, and you live your life in as much of a flow state as possible, man, you're smooth sailing. Unless you're an entrepreneur, then you're up and down. But
then that last,
you can still get flow in that too.
You can, absolutely. As
you're talking, I'm imagining flow state as like the Matrix version. Like going into that, because that's when he's most effective. That's when he gets it done. That's like, right, go into Super Saiyan mode, right? Yep. For all my would you say you're a dork? I guess I'm more of a nerd. Yeah. But very, very overlapping, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I see it, man.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Man, that flew by the way. Great stuff.
It did, right? Like, again, these conversations go quickly because, one, this is the stuff that we love talking about. Hence why we started this, guys, for everyone that's watching. Hence why we started this is because we love having these conversations. They're insightful. They help, right? They really help you get to where you need to be. Because like Stu said, all 4 of these areas are crucial in your life. Like, you can't, it's really tough to live the good life, to live, I shy away from saying your best life because it got real cliche and it's just one of those things. But like, to live a great life, the life that you design, it's really tough to just focus on 1 or 2 of these areas and not all 4. Like, if you're just mentally not in a good place, just in a horrible place, and you have bad relationships, but you have money and your health, like, you're not going to get far, right? Like, it's just not going to happen. Like, you don't have it. Like, you would never be in that place hence why we all, have heard of people and have seen people that have killed themselves that had the money, that had possibly some relationship, but they didn't have whatever. They just didn't have the mental piece. So again, that's why putting all these things together is so incredibly important. And we want to make sure that you are focused on all of these things. Like, we'll each tell you that ours is, important, or maybe even more important than the other, but like, they're all incredibly important. They're all incredibly important. And us being able to come together and just kind of have that conversation, and you to get that conversation, it's important. It's going to change your life, guys. It's going to absolutely change your life. So, Stu, I don't know if there's a question in the way.
No, I was actually just kind of thinking, we have these 4 pillars, and I think that for those out there, like if your homework assignment of what you've picked up on from this is to go out there and focus on these 4 pillars and focus how they tie together, and how to like recognize that what you may be going through is temporary, you can change it, you have choices. Like if that's your only homework assignment, I think one little bonus extra credit that I'd toss on there is find something you can be creative with. What's awesome is that everybody in here doesn't even think that there may be a 5th pillar, because we, through our work and through exactly what we're here doing, like we utilize that creative headspace in our work, in these calls, like in everything that we do. But I know people who may not be entrepreneurs, but maybe like artists, etc., who working for other people. Like creativity is a huge component. I would say, like, if you feel like your life is very dry, like that would be the bonus assignment, is figure out a way that you can like develop creativity. Everybody has it. I hear so many times people, I can't sing, I can't draw, I can't do whatever. You can find something. It takes practice. No one ever made a Billboard 100 without practicing how to sing. No one ever like got a drawing out there without first practicing. So that one's big.
Real quick, I'm gonna let you finish. I just heard something from the CMO of Skillshare.
Were you laughing because of the Kanye?
I'm gonna let you finish. That was a good one.
Good life, right? We got to quote Kanye.
That's right. But for real, I'm gonna let you finish. No, but I literally just heard it, that like there's a lady from, I think it was Skillshare, I think she's the CMO. She said, we believe their philosophy is, if you've ever picked up a crayon in your life, you're creative. Like at some point in your life, like you had to get some creativity out in some form or fashion, and then you just went to telling yourself a story that you weren't creative, but you had it. You just didn't keep practicing it and honing it and doing that process. So go ahead.
No, that's all. I mean, absolutely, man. I think, we've got about 7 minutes left here. And the final thing I wanted to talk about was this book right here. Let me get the lighting right. This is the 4 Agreements.
Let me do this.
By Don Miguel Ruiz. So this is the best book I've ever read when it comes to mental health and happiness and living a life that you are truly embodying and enjoying and creating your own flow state. So I'm actually going to do a book review like I've done before on this book on my Instagram, and I'll post that out there and etc. But everybody in here that's a part of this Good Life group, like we all read a lot. It is huge. And I think this is my favorite book so far. And the 4 agreements that he has, I'm just going to mention them real quick because I really want those to go through y'all's mind. And this would be like another one of those homework assignments, we'll say. But number 1 is don't make assumptions. We do this all of the time. These are exactly the type of stories and mental movies that we've all been talking about here today. Do not make assumptions. You are not omniscient. You do not know what is going through other people's heads. You do not know everything in the world. If you don't know it, ask or research. Like it's very simple, because you'll often project your idea of the reality onto a partner, onto a business partner, whatever. So don't make assumptions. 2, be impeccable with your word. So we talked a little bit about syntax here. And I think that this is so key, because this happens with a couple of my clients and this happens with my friends around me. They want to have a healthy, realistic, positive outlook on life. Yet they speak toxicity. They gossip. They put people down. They talk poorly about themselves. If you verbalize it, imagine, and for all the Harry Potter fans out there, Remember when like he got punished by Professor Umbridge and he had to write on the pen and it actually like kind of like made him bleed and it showed up on his skin? Think of that when you speak, because when you say something down about somebody else or about yourself, you are putting yourself down, period. Even if it's about somebody else, because you're casting judgment on them and you're casting judgment on yourself. And like, I cannot emphasize that enough. Like, be impeccable with your word, like say what you mean, and recognize that if you speak toxicity, you are putting toxicity further into your head. 3 is don't take anything personally. I used to do that all the time. I was miserable. It's not fun. Don't take anything personally. No one can control your headspace except for you, unless you let them. It is a choice. So my tip is always zoom out, recognize that there may be toxicity around you, negativity around you. It is your choice whether or not you let it in. I like to call that like the wallflower look. Like, recognize, step out of your head, recognize that there's a source of negativity and there's you, and don't take it personally. Address it. Don't get defensive. There's no reason to. They have no control over you. And then the 4th, which I probably won't be able to explain as well as this book right now, but it's always do your best. Now, for all the type A's out there that are running themselves dry, working the 90-hour weeks like I used to do, always do your best can sound really intimidating and scary and just downright frightening and exhausting. So always do your best also recognizes that you're going to have off days. You're going to have days off. And at the end of the day, you have to love and forgive yourself. As long as you are making the choices and doing what you can and recognizing that you're not going to be at 100% capacity all the time, just do your best. Because if you do your best in a situation, you cannot regret anything. You cannot. You really cannot. If you do your best and you recognize that you can only control what you try to control within yourself, etc., not external circumstances, you got nothing to regret. And I don't fuck with regret. I hope nobody does. It is the absolute worst thing in the world because you're looking in the past and you can't change it. I'm out.
That was awesome, bro. It was, and by the way, that regret scares the crap out of me too. It's what keeps me going, right? One thing that you got to know is one day you won't have the energy to do what you do. You won't have the mental capacity. Like, you won't have it. It will go away at some point, hopefully later, right? Hopefully in your 80s or 90s or whatever, but there will come a point in time where you can't physically or mentally do the things that you want to do. That is regret, and you have no ability to. I don't ever want to get to that place, hence why we continue to work, hence why we continue to get to where we need to be. Put in the work. Danette said, can you guys post the Good Life reading list or top 10 reads on LinkedIn? Absolutely, Danette. That's a great idea. We'll collaborate as a group, and we will make sure that we put something out there for you guys to read in all of the topics. We'll cover health, wealth, love, and happiness. We'll give you each some books and some material that you can dive into. But again, you always have us here as a resource. You always have us here as a resource. We are here to make sure you are getting whatever it is that you need in any of the areas that we are talking about. You can feel free to reach out to all of us. We are on social. You can find us on any platform. Most likely LinkedIn is a great platform where most of us are, but also Instagram. We're there as well. Feel free to reach out. Another Good Life, man. Nice job tonight, Stu. Such a great talk, such a great topic. It's almost 9. We're wrapping this thing up, but guess what? We have an after party, guys. The after party is in Clubhouse. So if you're watching this live with us, jump into Clubhouse right now. Search the Good Life After Party. We are jumping in there. We're going to continue this conversation. Stu, I'm going to recommend that we start it with the 4 agreements and diving in and starting that conversation on Clubhouse. And we can dive as deep in as you want to about the topic, because it's going to help in there. We can also get feedback, get some people on stage. So again, thanks for everyone for tuning in tonight. We appreciate it. Most importantly, we want you guys to get this value so you can change your life, because the good life awaits. You just have to continue to work on all of these things, all of these areas, continue to push yourself and grow in each of these areas. And these, the good life will happen for you. So signing off, guys, until next week, we will, what is the saying? What are we supposed to say? what is it like? Thanks, like living life. Like what were we supposed to
we gotta talk about this off wax, man. We need to call a meeting. We gotta get an intro locked in. We gotta get an outro locked in. But I suggest we go around and just sign off with what area we're passionate about and coaching, and then bounce out.
We'll figure it out. We'll do that next time. This time, on the Good Life, guys.
We might never have one.
We might never have one. Go to Clubhouse. We'll see you guys over there for the after party. Have a good night.